All right, so here I have some building blocks. These are Legos. I'll bet a lot of you have Legos. So they're building blocks of Lego buildings, right? Now they're just plastic. So I also have like a chapstick that's plastic. I also have my pencils are plastic, right? So I have a lot of things are plastic. There's something special about Legos where I can build with them. Cells are kind of similar. They're made of the same stuff, the same atoms, the same elements as everything else, right? But cells are put together in a very special way that makes living things. And kind of like if I took this Lego and I smashed it up into a bunch of little plastic pieces, could I still build with it? Thumbs up if I could, thumbs down if I can't. I'm seeing in the chat some definite thumbs down. Excellent. So you're right, we cannot build life. I'm sorry, we cannot build with Legos that have been smashed into pieces. Please don't try it because Legos are cool. We don't want to smash them. So we need the Lego to be shaped like a Lego for it to build life, right? Inside of our cells are lots of little parts, and we can keep breaking cells down smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until we get down to the elements. But if we do that, we can't build life with them anymore. They have to be put together in this special way in order to make living things. Now, there are some living things that are just one cell. Can anyone tell me a living thing that's just one cell? Oh, that's an interesting one. Good. What else? So bacteria, microbes, amoebas, unicellular organisms. Yes. So unicellular, just like a unicycle. Unicycle is a thing. A unicycle is a bicycle, kind of only with one wheel, right? It's a wheeled thing with one wheel. So a bicycle has two wheels, tricycle has three wheels. So unicycle, one wheel. Unicellular means one cell. So a bacteria has one cell. An amoeba has one cell. I was thinking of something else. Oh, protozoas have one cell, if you've ever heard of those. Yeast can have one cell. There's lots of things that can have just one cell. Do humans have just one cell? No, of course not, right? That's not possible. We would not be doing our human stuff otherwise. So when we have more than one cell, they have to work together, right? They have to all have different jobs to do. Kind of like if you have just one person in a business, that person has to do everything, right? So if you have one person in a business, they're in charge of everything. They buy stuff, they sell stuff, they work the cash register, they pay the bills, they clean the counters, they do everything, right? But if you have 50 people in a business, and they start having different jobs. One person might be in charge of one thing and one person in charge of another thing. The same thing happens with our cells. We have over 30 trillion cells in our body by the time we're grown-ups. Babies are born with like 15 trillion, if I remember rightly, so a lot less. But each of those cells has different jobs to do. Now today we're going to be coloring a picture of a cell. Do you think this is exactly what every cell in our body is like? No. Good. Not at all. So each cell in our body has its own separate jobs to do. So they have to be different from each other to do different jobs. So this is just kind of like a cell. So it'd be kind of like if you were drawing a picture of a house or a cat that didn't actually look like a specific cat, right? But we know if we see a picture of something with pointy ears and whiskers that it's still people's, it's a cat, right? If it has pointy ears and whiskers, it's cat and a long tail. And we just know that, even if it doesn't look like a particular cat. So that's kind of like what this picture is. It's like a picture of a cell, but it's not like a particular cell. Yeah, in general, thank you. Good word, in general. It's just a cell in general. All right, so when we're talking about cells, each part of the inside of a cell has different jobs to do to keep that cell alive. In order to think about it, some of you have already watched my cell class, so you already know about this, but some of you haven't. I like to think about cooking and baking. So I want to see in the chat what's something each of you likes to make in the kitchen. So maybe it's something sweet, maybe it's something healthy, whatever you like. So I'll tell you, like this weekend, my kids made homemade pizza. So that was good. Someone likes brownies. Excellent. Cookies. Wonderful. So people are for sweet tooth so far. What else? Someone else likes making pizza, pancakes, mug cake. Lots of fun things. All right, so think about those things you'd like to make in the kitchen. Now I want to hear what kind of things do you need in order to make that thing? So that might be ingredients, but it might be other stuff. So like for making a pizza, we need a really big pan, right? If we tried to put a pizza on like a muffin pan, it wouldn't work. It would get all lumpy, right? So we need a pizza pan to make a pizza. What do you need to make the things you listed here? So you need mug cake mix in a mug, right? It's not a mug cake if it's not in a mug. If you put it in a cake pan, it's not a mug cake anymore, right? A flat pan for pancakes, that's right. So if you take pancake batter, you can put it in a waffle iron, but do you make pancakes if you put it in a waffle iron? No, you make waffles, right? You can use the same batter, but you're making something different. So it has to be the right shape in order to be able to be the thing, whatever it is you're making. All right, so we need equipment and we need to get it the right shape. What else do we need? So we have a pan, we have a mug. So we're talking about the things that goes in. Oh, here, sugar, flour, eggs. Good. So we need ingredients, right? If we don't have ingredients, we can't make the thing. So we need ingredients to be able to make stuff. All right, what else do we need in order to make things? So I'm thinking about like if I was going to make cookies, would I just dump all my ingredients on the counter and just kind of like smush it up with my hands? No. We're going to need like a bowl, right? So we're going to have like a bowl, we're going to stir. Now, can I just take any old mix of stuff and just kind of like randomly put it together and get a cake? No. How do I know the right way to put it together? You need a cookbook, good, or a recipe. So a cookbook or a recipe tells us how to put things together in order to make a particular kind of food, right? Now, we can improvise some things. Like I'm gonna make a salad, I don't use a recipe usually. I just kind of chop things up, put them in a bowl. But let's say I wanted to make my mom's chocolate chip cookies. If I used a different recipe, would those be my mom's chocolate chip cookies? No, I have to make exactly the same recipe, right? In your body, if we used a different recipe, you wouldn't be you, right? So we need to use the right recipe when we're making things for your body. What do we call the recipe in a human? To make sure we make you and not somebody else. Good. DNA, genes. Excellent. All right, so let's talk about the difference between DNA and genes. I just had my cookbook and I set it down. Oh, there it is. I just saw it. So, oh, that isn't it. That's my skin book. All right. Do you ever just sit down? There it is, a book, and you don't know where you put it. I have so many books around me in here. All right, so here's a cookbook that I keep here in my office specifically for this purpose. So this cookbook has tons of recipes. So see here, like here's a turkey, here's a salad, here's some soup, here's some brownies. Like there's all different recipes, right? So all of these different recipes are things that I could make, but I'm not going to make all of them at once. I don't know if any of you have ever made every recipe in a cookbook. Has anyone done that before? I've never done that. So the cookbook, not yet, someone said. I like that. Not yet. Oops, someone else is stuck in the waiting room. Let me let them in. So yes. So most people don't make every recipe. Our cells don't make every recipe in our DNA. Each cell has different things it needs to make. There's a question in the chat, mRNA is the copy or messenger, right? And that is true. So a long time ago, back in the dark ages, we did not have cell phones. And we could not take pictures of something if we wanted a copy of it. And in fact, if we wanted a copy of something, we had to actually drive somewhere and use a copy machine. So it was a real pain. So let's say that I had a friend over and she really loved a recipe that I made. She really loved my soup or whatever. Should I just like tear the page out of my cookbook here and just hand it to her to take home? No, we don't want to do that, right? We don't want to damage our cookbook. Well, in the same way, if we want to make something out of our DNA, we don't want to tear out a page of our DNA to make it, right? So each recipe in our DNA is called a gene. So a gene is just one recipe for one thing. So you might have a gene for what kind of earwax you make, for example. So you might have a gene for gooey, slimy earwax or for dry, crusty earwax. So you have these different genes for different recipes for how to make earwax. And when it's time to make earwax, you don't want to like tear up your DNA to do that, right? So what we used to do is we made recipe cards. Some of you may still use them. I still use my recipe cards. I use the internet too, but also I really like my old recipe cards. So, and it looks like several other people do also. Excellent. So yes, recipe cards are a way of writing down the recipe, copying it out, and then taking it home with you. So my recipe cards all say where I got something. So it'll say Ella's cookies, or it will say Laura's soup, because I know where I got all these different recipes from. So when we have all these different recipes, yes, I know earwax is kind of yuck for some people, huh? Sorry, see comments in the chat. So if I ever sound random, it's because I'm replying to comments that the rest of you can't see. So sorry, I have all the entertainment there. So I'm trying to include all of you. So all those different recipes are from different people. I've copied them down. In our body, our cells need to copy out those recipes to make things from them. Does anyone know what the recipes actually are recipes for? There's a particular kind of thing it makes, just like our recipes make food. What do cell recipes make? Do you know? It's protein. The shape, that's true. So the shape of the protein is really important. So all the recipes in our cells are recipes for proteins. So those proteins, though, need to be made depending on which ones you need, and they need to be either saved for later or they need to be sent to someone else. Now, if I'm going to bake some cookies and I want to save them for later, do I just kind of like leave them on my floor and hope that they're okay? No, I need to box them up, right? So I have a container. What if I want to send the cookies to a friend? Do I just stand outside my house and like throw them at my friend? No. So we'd put them in a container, right? And either we'd like carry them somewhere or store them someplace safe. Good. We're going to take care of those cookies. We're going to store them. We're going to mail them. We're going to do something to take good care of those cookies so they get where they need to go, right? So our cells need to also take good care of those proteins because they might need to send them somewhere. They might need to keep them. So when we're talking about all these different parts of the cell, I found them really confusing when I learned about them because we just were thrown all these different things to memorize. And I don't ever want you to just memorize stuff if you can understand it instead. So I want to be comparing everything in the cell to stuff in our own kitchens because it's basically the same thing, just really, really, really tiny. And when we start talking about things like how viruses invade cells, it'd be kind of like if someone snuck into your house and started using your kitchen and didn't tell you. So we'll talk about that some other time in some other webinar, in some other set of topics even, because it's not even in this coloring book about viruses. That's right, very naughty. I agree. So does everyone have today's page either in the book or from the classroom? And I think Hannah mentioned, I apologize if the printout was not correct because apparently it was like a half page at first. And if that what you have, that's great because you're gonna need lots of room for labeling if you want to label this. If you want the full one though, and you happen to get the half one, the full one is there now. So, all right, let me turn my camera around and let's take a look at this cell. All right, so here we have a cell. And remember, this is just a cartoon of a cell. So it's not what a real cell looks like exactly. It's like a cartoon of a cat. We know it's a cat, but it's not exactly the same. All right, now when we look at this, does anyone know what this outside part of a cell is called? Good, cell membrane. Boy, people here are on top of it. Cell membrane. Right? So I'll label things for you. You can label them if you want to, but you don't need to. So cell membrane is the outside of a cell. Now here's a tricky question. Some of you may not know this, or some of you may. Does every cell just have a cell membrane like ours? So cell membranes are squishy like a balloon or like a ball. Does every kind of cell have a cell membrane? No. That's right, plants have cell walls. Good. And a fungus has a cell wall, and a bacteria has a cell wall. So our cells are really special with having this membrane, which is something when they try to treat infections, if they're trying to treat bacteria infections or fungus infections, then they can use that in order to treat the infection, because if they damage a cell wall, they aren't going to damage our cells because we don't have a cell wall. All right, so things need to get in and out of our cell wall. There's some different ways to do that. One way is through this. This is called a channel, which is basically a tunnel. Now here's a question. Does anyone know what a channel is made out of? It's what most stuff in our body is made out of. Does anyone know what most stuff in our body is made out of? And I'm just going to color this wall. You don't need to, or this, not wall, this membrane. Tissues, good. Most things in our body are made of tissues. Does anyone know what tissues are made out of? So almost everything in our body is made of protein. It's either made of protein or by protein. So let me explain what I mean by that. So DNA is a recipe for protein, right? So what that means is everything in our body that our DNA is a recipe for, it's actually a recipe for protein. So when, a lot of people know that our DNA has recipes for our hair color and our eye color. It's actually because our DNA has a recipe for the protein that gives us our hair color and our eye color. It has a recipe for how to make proteins that are in our immune system. That's one reason different people's immune systems work differently. Part of it is what infections you've already had, because your immune system learns stuff, right? But part of it is that my recipe for making stuff for my immune system is just a little bit different than yours. So my immune system works a little bit differently than yours. So all of those recipes are for protein, but not everything is made out of protein. Like think about your earwax. It's not made out of protein, right? But it's made by protein. Your DNA, your recipe book has proteins that are kind of like the tools for making stuff, which is why we make different kinds of earwax. Oh, there's a question in the chat about allergies. Yes, that's why my immune system has all sorts of allergies, because for some reason, my recipe makes immune cells that get confused really easily. And so my immune cells get super confused, and instead of just going like, bacteria, infection, kill it, they also go, grass, infection, kill it, which grass is not an infection, right? Grass cannot actually attack your body and make you sick, but my immune system gets super confused. So some people genetically are more likely to have allergies, and their immune system is more likely to get confused. Other people's immune systems, less likely to get confused, less likely to get allergies. So my immune system's just a little bit crazy that way. So if any of you have allergies, I do too. I'm sorry that your immune system gets confused. All right, so let's look then. So these, our channels, are made out of protein, but it's protein made in a certain shape. So I'm going to pretend for a minute this string of beads is protein. If we were to make it into like a nice tunnel shape, now it's not very long, so imagine it was really, really long, but we made it through a nice tunnel shape, we could just put that in the membrane and stuff could go through it, right? It'd be like a channel. But we could make protein in other shapes to do other things, right? So we'll come back to that in a little bit. Now, does anyone know? Oh, there are people who have pop beads besides me. I love pop beads, partly because I have an excuse to play with them because I use them for teaching. So now I get to play with pop beads. All right, does anyone know what this is that I just kind of highlighted or colored red? The question of pop beads. These are pop beads. See how they pop? And they make a popping sound too. So I'll hold it near my microphone here for a second and pull it. I don't know if you could hear that, but it popped. That's why they're called pop beads. So we're going to use these today to talk about protein, because protein comes together kind of like pop beads, only, microscopic. So does anyone know what this thing is that I just colored? So this is the recipe. Good. So of course, it's not exactly what DNA looks like, right? But in this case, we're going to say this is the DNA. Now, DNA can come in different forms. Thumbs up if you have heard of chromosomes before. Thumbs down if you've never heard of chromosomes before. Some people have heard of chromosomes. Yeah, lots of people have. All right. So does anyone know what a chromosome is? Put in the chat if you know what a chromosome is. Nope. Lots of thumbs down for that. Yeah, it's confusing, right? And actually, I was very confused. Good. So it's strands of nucleic acids. Good. So we'll talk about what that means in just a second. There's also something called chromatin. Thumbs up if you've heard of chromatin. Thumbs down if you've never heard of chromatin. Oops, there's someone else in the waiting room. There you go. So lots of people have not heard of chromatin. Some people have. Thumbs halfway. Yep, and that's a totally legitimate place to put them. There's a lot of things in life where I'm kind of like this. So I have here a ball of yarn. Now imagine if I took this yarn, you can kind of see it's pretty thin here, and I unwound it. First of all, it could go really far away, right? But second of all, it would be a tangled mess. So our DNA is really, really, really long. And it's just like a really, really, really long recipe for how to make protein. Because imagine if we took every recipe in this book, all the lines of writing in here, and we just lined them up in one long line, one long string. This book would not fit nicely in a book anymore, right? It would be a really, 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 really long string. It would go probably to another state than the one I live in. So yarn's kind of the same way, right? It could go really long. DNA is the same way. It goes really long because the whole recipe is just one little bit of the recipe at a time all the way along the DNA. We don't want this tangled mess of DNA in our cells, right? We don't want to break it. A really, really long recipe for a really complex body. Exactly. So what we do with our DNA is we wind it up into balls, kind of like this, only they're called chromosomes. Now there's so much of it, we can't just wind it into one ball. Instead, we have lots of balls of yarn, or DNA in this case, lots of balls of DNA, and then they're shaped into these kind of X-shaped things. That's what a chromosome is. It's basically balls of yarn, only DNA, that have been kind of wrapped together into this giant X. We have a bunch of them because we have so much DNA. And so you may have heard of your X chromosome or your Y chromosome, or you may have heard of chromosome 21 or chromosome 18. The reason why is because we have so many chromosomes that scientists have given them letters and numbers so we know which one's which. And we all get all these chromosomes. And it's kind of like having books in a set. Do any of you have like a set of books, like all the Harry Potter books or all the Laura Ingalls Wilder books or all of any particular set of books? Yeah, a lot of you do. Yeah, it's nice. It's fun having the whole set, right? And let's say that this was a set of books you really knew well, right? And you wanted to read a particular story, you would know which book to go to. You'd go to this book and pull it out and find the story in that book, right? That's what scientists do with chromosomes. They go to the particular chromosome where that recipe is in order to look at that recipe. So different chromosomes have different recipes, different genes. And now, yes, all of these are good books, and lots of you like these books. All right, so when we have these recipes in our DNA, we need to be able to get to them sometimes. We can't just leave them all wound up. Imagine if I tried to knit with this yarn but never unwound it. That would not work, right? Or imagine if I tried to use this book and I never opened it. I couldn't read the recipes inside. So when we take that chromosome, the wound up DNA, and we unwind it so we can read the recipe inside, that's called chromatin. It is very confusing because they give different names to the same thing depending on what it's doing. So if it's wound up, they call it a chromosome, and if they unwind it, they call it chromatin. But it's actually exactly the same thing. It's just what it looks like. It'd be like if when you were running, I gave you one name, and then when you were like sleeping, I gave you a different name. You're still the same person, right? So that's kind of what we do. Yeah, so chromatin is like a mixture of DNA and proteins that form the chromosomes. Yeah, so there's a question in the chat about what proteins that form chromosomes. When we take this DNA, rather than just kind of wrap it up, we actually wrap it around something. So if you've ever had like thread that you wrap around a spool, that's kind of what we do with chromosomes. So rather than just have balls of DNA, it's actually wrapped around proteins. So when you unwrap it, you let those proteins go. And then when it's time to wrap it up again, it gets wrapped around the proteins again. So that's kind of what happens. All right, so in this picture, we're cooking. So do you think, well, we're not cooking, but we're making stuff, right, with our cells. So in this picture, do you think that we have chromosomes or chromatin? Do you think it's wound up or do you think it's loose? What do you think? We're going to use it as a recipe. Good. I'm seeing some of each. So in this case, it'd be chromatin if we're going to unwind it and read the recipe. So that's, in this case, it would be chromatin rather than chromosomes. Now, chromatin is something that's open so we can read it, and then it gets wound up into chromosomes to keep it safe. So we're going to read the recipe. Now, in your house, do you have someone who reads the recipe? In my house, we have someone who reads the recipe. It's whoever is able to read. Now, at this point, all of us can read. When my kids were littler, they couldn't read. So when we were doing a recipe, for example, my son might read if he was able to read, and my daughter couldn't when she was littler. So does anyone know what it is that reads the recipes in our cells? Oh, yes, your mom or your dad might read the recipe, or you might read the recipe. Good. You forgot what it's called. That's totally fine. And you know what? These are things I didn't remember until I was in college. Oh, someone got ribosomes. Good. So ribosomes. Ribosomes. Read the recipe. See, there's an R there. Ribosomes read. That helps me remember that. So ribosomes read the recipe. So who can remind me, what's that recipe for? Good, it's protein. And it's for reading. We need to read that recipe, right? So that recipe is for protein, how to make protein. So let's talk a minute about protein. Protein is like a long string of beads, only they're called amino acids. So when the ribosome is reading the recipe, it'd be kind of like if you had a thing that told you how to put beads together, and it said, do the round white bead, then the purple round bead, and then the purple round bead, and then the blue round bead, and then the orange teardrop bead, and then the purple round bead, and then the pink bumpy bead. So you had this like recipe for what order to put them in. That's what your DNA is. So when you look at a long string of DNA, all it is a long string of which bead to put next on the string of protein. So that's what the ribosome is actually reading, is add a bead, add a bead, add a bead. And so it just goes through and adds one bead at a time as it reads the recipe, and it makes the protein longer and longer and longer and longer and longer as it adds those beads. Now, would a really long string of something be super useful in the body, do you think? Or do you think we need something that's a particular shape? So yeah, we need something that's a particular shape. Oh, can it be mutated or changed? It can be mutated or changed. The recipe can have changes in it. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. Most of the time, because it's random, it's a nothing thing. It doesn't do anything. But everyone here had DNA that worked because you're all people, right? So mutations can happen, but they're not something to be scared of because your DNA already did its job. You already are a person. So you don't need to be scared of DNA mutating. It's something I got scared of when I first learned about it because I thought maybe my DNA was just going to start mutating. It doesn't do that. It doesn't just randomly start becoming something else. The changes that might happen in DNA would change one little letter. So imagine if I took this whole cookbook and I just changed one letter in it somewhere. And then I changed one letter. And then I changed one letter. It would take a lot of letters to change before it really had a big impact on somebody. That's why it's not something that happens very often, that someone has something like that. Like a small typo. That's right, it's like a typo. Now there are some things like skin cancer, if you've ever heard of skin cancer, where the sun has damaged some of the DNA, and so there's a lot more mistakes in it. But the good news is that's something we can see and take care of because it's right there on the skin. All right, so let's then look again at our coloring page here. So we have our ribosomes that are reading the recipe. Now I'm going to show you which of these are ribosomes because it can be a little bit confusing because I had Hannah draw this with a bunch of circles because guess what? When you look at a real cell in real life, it's got a bunch of circles in it. And it can actually be kind of confusing to look at because there's so many circles. I actually cannot look at a cell under a microscope and tell you which part is which unless it's stained. So we actually use special kinds of dye to know what's what. So these ones are ribosomes. I'm going to add some more ribosomes over here. So of course over here we're making protein too. Now does anyone know, we have this thing here, we have this big blob here and it has like little arms coming off of it. What is this? Ooh, purple. Yes, and you can color this any color you want. So I colored turquoise, but you can definitely do purple. Golgi body, that's a great word. And actually it's really fun to say too. This is the Golgi body down here, or the Golgi apparatus. So I'm going to put this down here, Golgi. In some countries they say Golgi. Yes, oh, someone knows what this is but forgot the name. So this one is the hardest word here. It's the endoplasmic reticulum. So I want you to try saying that at home. Endoplasmic reticulum. It's fun to say, but it's also a nuisance. So people who work with it all day, they don't want to be saying, well, today I was studying the endoplasmic reticulum, and what I noticed about the endoplasmic reticulum in this particular cell. So instead, we just call it the ER. Endoplasmic reticulum, ER. Exactly. Someone got that in the chat before me. So here is the endoplasmic reticulum. Now, some endoplasmic reticulum is rough, and some is smooth. It got those names because for a long time nobody knew what it did. They just looked at it and they were like, huh, some of it looks rough and some of it looks smooth. Does anyone have an idea why it would look rough or smooth? Why does this stuff look rough? What makes it bumpy? Yeah, because of the ribosomes on it. So it looks bumpy because of the ribosomes. So all rough ER is ribosomes stuck to it. All right, so that's the stuff out here. What about this here? Does anyone know what this part is? So this is a pretty important part of our body here. So I'm going to grab a different color. What is this? Special place. Good, it's a nucleus, the control center. Look at all those words. I looked away from the chat for a second, like everyone answered. So yes, this is the nucleus. This is where the DNA is kept safe. So we don't want things to come in, we don't want things to go out. So the nucleus is a very special, it's like the command center of the cell where we don't have to worry about anything bad happening to our DNA. Now, not everything out there has a nucleus. So things like amoebas don't have a nucleus. Their DNA is just like floating around. But, you know, that's not a really healthy choice. So we keep ours tight, nice and safe in here. The DNA is protector, yes. And it also means that our DNA is safe from getting mixed up. Do you know bacteria actually share DNA with each other? So kind of like if I was looking around the room, which at the moment everyone's cameras are off, we'll turn them on at the end after we've turned off the recording. But if I looked around the room, I was like, ooh, I like Thalia's hair. I like Arabella's hair. I like Matthew's hair. I like Alexandria's, whoever's. I want to steal it. And so I just like shared my DNA with you and you shared your DNA with me and I got your hair. And of course we can't do that, right? But that's what bacteria do. Bacteria actually will trade DNA with each other, which is kind of weird. But that's one reason that bacteria can change really fast compared to humans. I can't just like suddenly change my hair color unless I dye it, but I can't change like the natural hair color. But bacteria can change really quickly because they can trade DNA. So plus minus, I don't get to change my hair color. It's a good thing I like my hair. But here, we keep our DNA nice and safe. Now there's this thing in the middle of the nucleus called the nucleolus. Does anyone know what the nucleolus does? Nucleus? Nucleolus. The funny thing is the reason why it's named that is people didn't know what it did. So they were like, well, let's call this the nucleus, which means the seed or the kernel. And then they're like, I don't know what this is, but it's smaller than the nucleus and it's inside it. So let's call it the nucleolus, which just means like little nucleus. Right, to produce and assemble ribosomes. Someone got that. So this makes the ribosomes, which read the recipe. So it's like a special place for making those ribosomes and being able to send them out and do their job. So that's a pretty important thing. Now, this is actually made out of the same stuff. There's a little bump here. This is made out of the same stuff. I'm not doing a good job tracing, but you get the idea. This is actually made out of the same stuff. The membrane. This is made out of the same stuff. This is made out of the same stuff. Does anyone know what this stuff is that makes up all of these different lines? So it's called a bilipid membrane. And this is a word I've never used in any of my classes. So if you've learned mostly from me, you won't have heard this before. Bilipid membrane. So bilipid means there's two lipids or two fats. So there's two fats that stick together and make this all the way around. Now, what happens if we mix fat with water or oil with water? Does anyone know? Yeah, it does not mix together. Good. It separates. It floats. Good. So think how clever this is. Our cell membrane is made of a double layer of fat. And so that means that there's water on the inside, there's water on the outside, and then there's this nice little bubble of fat protecting everything in between, which I think is super cool. And what it means is there's some things that can get through there, things that can mix with fat, but everything else has to use a channel or some other method for getting around. So that's why all of this is made out of that, is it's the stuff that we can make these little bubbles with and put things inside and it won't mix. So out here we have this liquid, this water, the cytoplasm. It won't mix because it's all inside this bubble of fat. Well, it's a special kind of fat. All right, so all of this being made out of this means that we can pinch off pieces and attach them someplace else. So that's what's happening here. All right, so let's talk about the protein here for a second. Let's put some protein in here. You can put some protein in yours if you want. There's some protein in there. So protein can be made inside the endoplasmic reticulum, or look at these ribosomes. They're floating around out here. They can be made out here in the cytoplasm. But if it's floating around in the cytoplasm, it's now outside of one of these packages. Does anyone know what these packages are called? They're called vesicles. And they're kind of like the plastic containers we store food in. Like last night, we had a nice supper, we had some leftovers, we're gonna put it in a plastic container. So these are containers, they're made out of little fat bubbles inside our cells that are microscopic for holding the proteins that we make. If you want, you can put proteins in yours. You don't have to, but I'm putting proteins in mine. And so we can actually carry them around in there. We can store them in there. We can send them outside the cell. We can do all sorts of things because now they're in these little packages. In this case, we're going to make the package stick to the Golgi body because we've got some more work to do on this. Right now, this protein here is just a long string. Remember, if we curl it up in the right shape, we could make a channel. We could make a tunnel to get in and out of the cell. Or maybe we could curl up in a different shape and we could make it like a tool for building something. Or maybe we could make it a part of our immune system. So there's lots of different things proteins can become if they're shaped right. So this Golgi body is what's going to shape it. Always looks to me like a stack of pancakes. And here we are, Golgi body. And then when it's all done, we can send it out. So we can pinch off a little piece that goes floating away, and we can either just keep it inside of our cells, oops, let me move this down, or we can send it to the edge, and one of these little ones could just float over, and then it touches against it, and it just bloop opens up and just spits stuff out of the cell. So that's one way to get stuff outside the cell. If you don't want to use your channel, or if it can't just go through the fat. The next question here, there's a ton of them, hang on. Where does stuff go that leaves the cell? Oh, that's a good question. So some things just wiggle out of through the cell and go into your blood and get carried away. So carbon dioxide, for example, we breathe out, we breathe in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide. That's going from our cells into our blood, and that can actually just kind of wiggle through and go away through our blood into our lungs, and then we breathe it out. Some of the things, though, are in vesicles, and some of them go to particular spots. Some of them are garbage and get eaten up by our immune system. So it all depends what it is. How do cells maintain their homeostasis and respond to changes in their environment? Well, that's a big question. So homeostasis means staying in balance. So like my house, I try to keep in a homeostasis where it's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's not too messy, right? I try to keep everything kind of balanced. Our cells need to do that too. And the question of how they respond to all that is really complicated and kind of beyond what we're talking about. But that's why cells each function kind of as a living thing because they can respond to changes. Oh, I'm sorry you had leukemia. Well, that would be an interesting topic to talk about sometime for sure. And I hope you're doing better. Yep, and definitely there's some more things here about being healthy and so forth. And the important thing to know is that when people have things happen to their bodies, they did not cause it, and nobody caused it. You know, nobody wants bad things to happen. Nobody wants to have treatments. We all have different things that happen to us that we don't have control over. I have asthma. I didn't do anything to cause it. It just happened. But there are things I can do to take good care of it. And if someone gets leukemia or gets some other big disease, they didn't do anything to cause it. It just happened. But you can do things to take care of it. So that's the important thing to know, is that we can always do something to take care of ourselves. can be something big, it can be something little, but we can all make choices and to take care of ourselves and make things better. Sometimes things get more better than others, right? Some people still struggle with things, but they always have their families. They always have things they can do to take care of themselves and feel better, and that's really important. All right, so I want to talk about some of these other things in the cell. If there aren't any other questions, let's see here. I think that was all of it. Okay, if I missed a question, just put it, copy and paste it back in. What are these things here? Does anyone know what those are a cartoon of? So these are made out of the same stuff, but they're really different. Oh, good, mitochondria. Yeah. Does anyone know what mitochondria do? Mitochondria are the power plants for our cell. Oh, and I forgot to quiz you guys. I was going to ask you some questions, so we'll go back over the rest of it in just a minute. Yeah, they use sugar to give energy. They generate chemical energy. Boy, you guys are all on top of this. So sugar goes in, right? And oxygen goes in. Can't quite read that. And it uses it to make something called ATP, which is the energy that your cell knows how to use. Your cells don't know anything, or aren't able to do anything with sugar. Doesn't work for them. But the mitochondria make it into something your cells can use. So that's why we have to have blood sugar. If you learn about diabetes, this is where that sugar needs to go instead of being outside your cell. It needs to go in here. All right, so then we also have this thing. So this is not exactly what it looks like in real life. This is a special kind of vesicle called a lysosome. It's like a garbage can or recycling center for our cell. Now all of this, remember I was saying there's liquid in here, right? I saved coloring this part for last because we have all this other stuff going on in here. I didn't want to color it until I'd got all this other stuff in here, but there's this liquid around it called cytoplasm. Cytoplasm, we can break up into two different words. Cyto means cell, and plasm means gooey stuff. There we go, cytoplasm, cell gooey stuff. So now all these things can move around inside of here. There's a question in the chat, is that why it has the arrows in it to show that? Oh yes, to show the recycling. That's why we put it that way. All right, so any questions so far about our cells? All right, so I'm going to ask some questions for you. Which part of your cell is the cookbook? See if you guys can guess that. Put that in the chat. Which part of your cell is the cookbook? Good, the DNA, your genetics. Excellent. So your DNA, chromosomes, chromatin, genetics, all the different words you use for it, that's your recipe book. All right, what is it that reads the recipe? Reads that recipe. Good, ribosomes. Excellent. All right. Where do the ribosomes come from? It's a tricky one. Where are the ribosomes made? A few people don't know. So it's the nucleolus. Yeah, inside the nucleus, that's right. So in the nucleus and nucleolus. Remember, in the nucleus is this nucleolus that makes the ribosomes. So there's a spelling for those of you who are wanting to know what the word looks like. And you don't have to write it down unless your grown-ups say, but there it is. Nucleolus makes the ribosomes. All right. So the ribosomes are reading the recipe in order to make what? My recipes, my cookbook make food. What do the ribosomes use the recipes to make? The recipes are made out of DNA, good. And they make proteins, excellent. That's a tricky one. It makes us. Yes, it does make us. So it makes proteins, which make us. Excellent. So those proteins are not always the right shape right off the bat. So they can just be made out in the cytoplasm, out in the goo, but sometimes they're made in another place so they can get packaged up and sent for shaping. Where is it that it gets made? Where does it get mixed up? It's on the inside of something. Yeah, the ER, good. Endoplasmic reticulum. All right, now let's say this was made in the endoplasmic reticulum, but it's just kind of a long string. We need to go get it the right shape. So we're going to put it in a little bubble and send it somewhere. What's that little bubble called? Does anyone know that? Vesicles, excellent. All right, so now those vesicles are going to drop off this protein at something to get the right shape. Oh, you guys are ahead of me. There's already people putting Golgi body in. Good, Golgi body. So that Golgi body or Golgi body, depending on what country you're in, it's going to shape it up to be the right shape. It might even put some decorations on it, which make it work better. Might put some other proteins on it, some fat, some carbohydrates, some sugar. It is such a fun word, I agree. So it's going to shape it correctly. And then we can either store it for later, or we can send it out. Now, what is it that takes sugar and oxygen and makes it into energy for our cells? Good, the mitochondria. Excellent. All right, so when we're talking about all these different parts of our cells, they're important to understand because everything in our body is made of cells. When we talk about other parts of our body, our heart is made of heart cells. Our liver is made of liver cells. Our skin is made of skin cells. And those cells are what are doing all the work that we talk about. So when we talk about something happening in our body, it's actually cells doing it, which is so cool. I want to show you a quick video. It's an animation, and it's on YouTube. And since all of you are here, I know you all have access to this. There's a list of different videos that I've kind of curated that I sometimes use when I want to demonstrate something. So if this is not in that list yet, it will be. I will make sure it's there. And then I want to show you an actual picture under a microscope of a cell doing stuff, which I think is really cool. And then we'll go ahead and we'll turn off the recording and we will turn on our cameras. So here is Now I want to show you real quick a picture of a cell actually doing stuff. When I got to actually see cells being like living things, it really changed how I thought about my body. Now this is going to be a sped up video because cells move really slowly. It's a little bit grainy because it's about 10 years old and your grown-ups can tell you technology and videos were not as good back then. But you're going to be able to see really well that there is a cell, a white blood cell, which is part of your immune system, chasing bacteria. Like actually going around, finding it and eating it. When I got to finally see things like that under a microscope, it completely changed how I saw my body. Because before it just seemed like kind of a bag of goo. And that's when I was like, oh, it's like doing stuff. So if you were to like cut your finger and get some bacteria in there, this is exactly what your body would be doing in order to fight that off. So let's look at that. Here we go. Is cool. So when your body is working, it's the cells that are working. It's the cells that are making your heartbeat. They're cells that are digesting your food. All of these things that are happening are being done by cells. Now, some of them can't move around because they're all attached to each other. But some of them, like your immune cells, are actually moving around. So those of you watching the recording, we're going to be turning it off so that you don't get to see who's here. But those of you who are here, I'm going to turn off the recording. If you don't want to turn on your cameras, you're welcome to just leave here in a second or now, because we're all done with this part. But then we can go ahead and turn on our cameras, and anyone who wants to can get to meet each other.